Greetings everyone, I'm Mark. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title, I'm continuing my trek through Season 8 of Everybody Loves Raymond, one episode at a time. We are now on Episode 9, another episode that was written by Tucker Colley. And of course, another one where we got Fred Willard and Georgia Engel playing the McDougalls in their little cameo appearances. It, of course, is The Bird. And this is the Thanksgiving one. And out of all the Thanksgiving episodes that this show has done, this is probably the episode with the weirdest premise because of how ridiculous the fight in this episode begins. But considering what we've seen from the Barones, this is par for the course, especially when you put them in there with McDougalls, which we've seen from episodes from the previous season. They're not the best people when it comes to getting along. And even though they are family now, extended family that is, but still family nonetheless, they're still going to get at each other's throat when the time comes. Now, the fact that it's Thanksgiving should mean they should put their differences aside, and they're trying to, just for Robert and Amy's sake, as we see when they arrive at the McDougal's house. So, right there's a big step for the Barones, mainly Frank and Marie, that they're going to their house out of the state in order to try and make peace with them. But you can tell there's like a little bit of awkwardness underneath the center. I mean, at first they're like, we're doing a pageant? Alright. Peter's there, which, this is a weird thing. It's like, didn't they just kick him out and all that? But I guess that's Thanksgiving, so he's probably going to be like, alright, I'll go back just for Thanksgiving. And nothing seems like it's there, but that also goes in line with something I've mentioned off and on again about this sitcom writing. Gotta, for the most part, go back to the status quo so we can show the episodes in any order in some cases. Everything seems like it's going alright, and then all of a sudden they hear a noise at the front, and it turns out a bird has crashed into the front of the house. Kind of looks like a dove based on what we see in Pat's hand. Now, before I get to this, we've had the usual type of humor we would expect from these characters at this point, where Pat's asked Marie about her cooking. Marie's tried to be nice. I mean, we, the audience, knowing her character, know what type of comment she's saying, but she's toning it down a bit. Deborah leaves the room, so we don't have the long-term witness. And then it's just the actual McDougalls and actual Barones, without marriage or anything thrown into it. Now, Pat takes the bird into the other room. They all think that she's going to go take it to do something, but no, she killed it. Now, the fun thing about this is just how the Barones react, because you would not expect them to react like this. You can say they overreact, like, you killed a bird. Like, yeah, we had to put it out of its misery. Which, what makes this funny is the fact that Georgia is saying that in that high, slightly nasally voice she uses for her character. I had to put it out of its misery. That whole point, which is what really adds to the humor. And it goes into a back and forth. Of course, Hank at one point cites the Bible, as we expect he would. You know, we were given dominion over the land, and be like, according to your fictional God, yeah, we were. But for the humor, it definitely fits the situation, especially since they're saying it to some people who share their values but just aren't as devout. And of course, even with his devout Catholicism, Frank is not going to take that line down, and he really does fire some back. Now, Amy and Robert get into it at one point when Robert is just trying to stay out of the argument and just watch it, but then Amy starts getting in there a little bit. And we find out some fun stuff, how she joined in a little bit, like getting mice to feed to the snake. Which leads to one of my favorite little moments in the fight, where Hank is like, I wish we still had that snake. Marie, oh my god, Frank, they're going to feed us to the snake. and of course, Ray pops in, no snake is that hungry. Like, yeah. But just the fact that Marie's first inclination with that comment is, I wish that they were going to feed her to the snake. Oh, that fits, and of course, nice little biblical joke there too, if you really think about it. Now, my whole thought on this whole argument and where I stand, I kind of stand a little bit in the middle, but I lean a little bit more towards the Barones for one reason, and that is, they, even though they seem to have put many birds out of their misery, they're not vets. For all we know, that bird could have been saved. So killing it would be unnecessary. Like, just doing that, it just seems like they did it just to do it, excuse me. So it does kind of show that they do have a little bit of a dark side, even if they're doing it for what they perceive to be the right reason. But it's like, just because the bird hit the house doesn't mean you automatically have to jump to, oh, we got to wring its neck. So in that regard, I do kind of love Frank's little joke that he does about when Pat grew up on a farm, about the chicken slept with one eye open. Now, when Deborah comes back in with the kids, they try to make them all play nice. Of course, with it being the first Thanksgiving pageant, of course it is drawn down about the lines of where the fight is. Barones are the Native Americans, and then everyone else is the Pilgrims. They're trying to go through it, but then the fight gets brought up, and Deborah's like looking back and forth, like, what the heck? And when she finds out what caused the fight, it's like, really? And of course, this causes Robert to switch sides, which of course you can imagine the obvious joke that comes from there. And they keep going back and on about the bird and all that, which leads to one of my favorite jokes in this episode. And that is where he's all going on about the bird, about it deserved better than what it got. And then Pat brings out the turkey. Frank immediately drops the argument. And they go down to eat. Which is like, really? And I think that is the big punchline zinger of this episode, is that the argument on this Thanksgiving was so ridiculous and yet so thematically on point because it involved a bird, the critter that we all gather around on that day at the end of November to stuff our faces with, that it goes from him being outraged about the death of one type of bird to not caring whatsoever about the death of another bird other than the fact he gets to stuff his face with it. So on point thematically and so in character for Frank. And Peter Royal sells it very well. I mean, I've already brought up the injury thing, but he is a little bit more higher energy in this one, so it definitely adds to it. And that's the perfect way to end this episode too. No epilogue, just I'm going to sit down and that's the end of the episode. Now, even with that and it being a Hank and Pat cameo episode, compared to some of the past Thanksgiving episodes, it's not the strongest, but it does have a little bit of that freshness because of the fact we have the newer regular characters thrown in there. And of course, more of the culture clash, especially when Frank finds out they don't have a TV or a radio. Which leads to the one bit of trivia I got here. One of the reasons Frank is trying to point out why they don't have it for entertainment is like, what if the president comes on and cancels Thanksgiving? Which I can just imagine people's reaction to a president doing that regardless of what side of the aisle they were on. Apparently, though, this nearly came true back during the pandemic. And that was mainly the White House releasing statements for Americans not to travel. Of course, we all know how that went. You can't tell us what to do. Alright, well, you get sick, that's on you then. So a nice little bit of reality, almost imitating art, but shows that Frank did kind of have a point when he came up with that, even if we all know he just wants to watch the game. And I can get why the McDougalls don't have a TV but a radio. It's like, really? But then again, they kind of strike me as the people that they wouldn't be on the line of dancing and all that being sinful, but probably most of what's on the radio is not good for consumption. They just strike me as that. And that's really all there is to say about this episode. I mean, like I mentioned, it's a fun episode and has a nice little ending premise. The character dynamics are good. It's the type of jokes you would expect for this holiday with these characters, especially at this point in their development. But I'd rather watch some of the earlier Thanksgiving episodes as a whole. It's just, you can definitely tell they're trying to think of a good idea with this. And even though thematically it's on point, it's not one that I'd go out of my way to watch. I think this is one I only watch when I'm watching all of Season 8. Unlike the next one, which I can definitely see myself watching in isolation, and it's one of my favorite episodes of this season, and like this episode, I did see it first run. Next one's going to be about another perceived slight that Frank has, and he's directing towards his son Raymond, and that of course involves his beloved collection of dearly departed jazz records. Till then, everybody.